pleasant morning to the Vice President and Principal, Mr. Zacarias A. Quintin Jr., Vice Principal in the High School Department, Ms. Edelita A. De La Cruz, Student Activities and Academic Coordinator, Ms. Maria Carmela C. Cadua, School Registrar and IT Head, Mr. Lester R. Manalata, Academic Secretary, Ms. Patricia Ann S. De La Peña, our resource speaker for today, Mr. Joshua A. Gundayao, faculty members, and students. Welcome to the art webinar as we are streaming live via Facebook. To formally start our program, let us have a prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Dear Father, we offer to you everything and thank you for everyone gathered here today. May we ask you for your blessings and guidance so that the activities set for today be successful. We ask you to open our eyes to see the wonderful things from this activity. We ask you to open our ears to retain the invaluable knowledge. Open our minds for us to think wisely. Fill us with understanding, cooperation and peace in fulfilling our responsibilities. Open our hearts that we may receive your everlasting love. And open our spirit that we may know that you are with us all throughout the day. We ask all this, in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Once again, welcome school administrators, coordinators, faculty members, and students, as we are conducting a virtual art seminar. Before we proceed to the webinar, I would like to remind everyone that while we are having our program, do not forget to comment your full name as well as your grade and section. Likewise, let us also practice Corinthian school standards and etiquette set by the school. Also, please refrain from posting unnecessary remarks and taking screenshots of the program. For today's webinar, our resource speaker will discuss changing perspective in the arts. The lecture will look into how arts evolve over the years. In addition, it will look at the practical applicability of the arts in other disciplines. Therefore, allow me to introduce our resource speaker today. He studied Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy at Immaculate Conception Major Seminary, finished Master of Arts Philosophy at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, at present, studying Masters of Health Research Ethics at University Malaya, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Let us have one of the senior high school faculty, Mr. Joshua Cedric A. Gundayao.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture entitled Changing Perspective in Arts. This is in line with last month's celebration of Arts Month. I am Joshua Cedric A. Gundayao, and I will be your lecturer for today's discussion. Now, you may wonder, why is our presentation called Changing Perspective in Arts? People would assert that, isn't it that arts is something well-defined? Isn't it that it is something fixed, something constant? Later on in our discussion, we would argue otherwise. We will prove that the definition and understanding of arts evolve, that the meaning of what arts is in relation to the real world had been continuously changing as history continues to unfold. So for this lecture, we divide this presentation into four main parts. First is the brief evolution of arts. Second is arts as envisioned today. Third would be arts across disciplines. And fourth would be question and answer. Since we cannot do the question and answer, you can just send your question if you have some question clarification to your respective advisors and they can relay it to me. Okay, so let's start. Before going to how the definition of arts evolved, it's first and foremost important to clarify what does art is what does arts really mean. Now, ordinarily, whenever we talk or whenever we say the term or the word art, people would oftentimes associate it with paintings, colors, and drawings. When you say what our subject for today is arts, the first thing that perhaps parents or students would immediately think of is that they need to bring art material that is composed of pencil, scissors, coloring materials, etc. And if we are going to contrast arts to other disciplines such as biology, mathematics, we oftentimes see arts as something basic and elementary. When we say elementary, it's very shallow. I mean, you don't need to exert much effort in order for you to understand it, in order for you to engage yourself with it. However, it should be clarified to us that arts is beyond visual arts. The paintings, the drawings that we normally see are just one aspect of arts. There is more to that. I mean, architecture for one can be considered an art. Another would be landscape. What else? Music, literature, drama, theater, even cinema. So if you're going to look at it closely, oftentimes, most of the things that we encounter into our day-to-day activities are forms of artwork. So it's not just limited to colors, paintings, and drawing. It is more than that. And in addition, arts is more than aesthetics. More particularly, if we're going to look at architecture, the application of arts architecture, we promote art, we do art, not simply because we want to make something beautiful, not simply because we want to appreciate beauty. More than that, we do this because we know based on experience that integrating art, for example, in architecture can help save us some energy. I mean, electricity. If we're going to look at contemporary architecture today, they are more of having big panels of window in their walls so that these windows could help them save or conserve energy by using less indoor lights. Now let's look at the brief evolution of arts. How does the definition of arts evolve and how does its application evolve across eras, across epochs of history? The first period is what we call the ancient period. When we say ancient period, it is characterized by the anthropomorphism of the Greek mythology. Now let's divide these two phrase, word and phrase. The anthropomorphism and Greek mythology. I think you are a little bit acquainted with what Greek mythology is. Greek mythology is the belief to the different gods and goddesses such as Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, etc. Now, when we say anthropomorphism, it came from two Greek words. The first word is anthropos, meaning man, and morphos, meaning body. So if we are going to translate anthropomorphism, the literal translation is man body. So what does anthropomorphism of Greek mythology is all about? During the time, in the ancient period, people would oftentimes explain their day-to-day activities based on the activities of the gods and goddesses. For example, there is lightning. If there's a lightning, the ancient Greek people would think that there is lightning perhaps because Zeus is mad. There is a tsunami, maybe because Poseidon is at war or he's angry. Things like that. Now, because they want to have a close connection with these gods and goddesses, they started to anthropomorphize them. They started to interpret how these gods and goddesses look like based on how ordinary or mortal people look like. That is why when artworks or when arts started to emerge in ancient period, the first form of arts was in the form of sculpture. Isn't it that whenever we think of Greece, the first thing that we can think of are different statues, stone statues of different gods and goddesses. So during this ancient period, that is how they make use of arts. They use arts in order to establish a relationship to the gods and goddesses that they see or that they saw as something so powerful that can have a control over their life. Because of that, art then is perceived as the highest science. It's the highest discipline. Why is it the highest discipline? Simply because through the use of this art, they can understand, they can interpret, they can interpret, and they can relate to the gods and goddesses. Since the gods and goddesses are the highest of all beings, since the gods and goddesses are the highest of all entities that are existing, it is fitting that those things related to them are also deemed to be high in nature. That is why arts is the highest science, because it is the interpretation of how these gods and goddesses look like. However, in the same period, ancient period, there is a philosopher by the name Plato who said that arts is a poor copy of reality. It's a poor copy of reality. Why is it a poor copy? Because according to Plato, artwork is simply an imitation of what we are perceiving, of what we are seeing. Say, for example, I have this phone with me. If I am going to illustrate or draw this phone, what I have in the piece of paper is simply a copy, not necessarily a representative, but a poor copy of what it is, of what the original thing is. That is why for Plato, he doesn't believe much on arts as being the highest science. Nonetheless, we can argue that during the ancient period, regardless of Plato and the Greek mythology's use or understanding of science, we can argue that on this particular period of history, arts is the expression of one's knowledge. Why do we create arts during this particular period? Or why do they create, or why do they produce arts? Simply because they want to express whatever knowledge they have. So they make use of arts as the creative outlet in interpreting their knowledge. The second period is what we call the medieval period. Now, when we say medieval period, it is oftentimes characterized by the triumph of Christendom. Why do we call it the triumph of Christendom? Because during this particular period, Christianity as a religion has sort of gained the control over the entire world. Take note of the word sort of, because they have not totally controlled it. Why did the medieval period resulted to the triumph of Christendom? Because the Roman Empire aids the Christianization of the whole world, more particularly of the different territories that they have captured. Now you may wonder, so does it mean that the Roman Empire really loved Christianity? That's only one interpretation of it. But some commentators and critics would say that because during this period, Roman Empire is already at the brink, okay? They're already at the brink of danger of collapsing. Since they saw Christianity as something powerful, they started to espouse it, hoping that espousing Christianity could help fortify the more or less crumbling down Roman Empire. And so, through the power of Roman Empire, they were able not only to Christianize different territories, but also Christianize arts. Hence, in medieval period, whenever we talk about arts, it is oftentimes limited to religious art. That is why arts during the medieval period became the glimpse to the transcendent. When we say glimpse to the transcendent, it means that it's a foretaste. It's a preview to the life after death. It's a preview to the heaven. It's the preview to the world where God is the one, or where man can encounter God. That is why whenever we look at different forms of artwork during medieval period, we can see that these artworks were, should I say, Christianized. There are some, but there are only very few artworks that are not influenced by Christianity during this particular period. The next period is the modern era. Now, modern era is a rather happened after the Renaissance. So there are a thin line between the Renaissance and the modern era. So modern era is characterized by the domination of science or empirical knowledge. During the modern era, people started to appreciate science, but in the sense of it producing empirical knowledge. When we say empirical knowledge, these are forms of knowledge that we obtain through the use of our senses. And the human person has 5 senses: the sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of hearing, and sense of touch. So whenever knowledge is obtained through the use of these senses, we call it empirical knowledge. So during this time, science such as biology and empirical science started to dominate the intellectual climate. Hence, there is a decline in art appreciation. So during this particular period, the dignity, should I say the dignity or the value of art starts to little by little go down, because people during this particular period started to put or starts to put science into the pedestal as the standard of where knowledge should come from. Therefore, during this era, they say that arts should be something rational. If it is rational, then it's worthless. What do you mean by rational? Meaning to say, art should be something intelligible, something that can make the human person more intelligent, something that has meaning, something that is deep, something that can educate the human person. The last period would be the contemporary period, or the period where we are placed in. Now, contemporary period are sometimes, or rather is sometimes called by people as the post-truth era. It is the breaking away from the conventional. So if before, from the ancient period down to the modern period, people are using conventional materials such as painting, canvas, colors, etc. In contemporary period, artists starts to become experimental in terms of how they produce arts. Hence, if you're going to look at the streets, you can saw that there are sometimes graffitis. You know what graffitis is? Some people would call it vandalism, right? I mean, the drawings on the walls, but in some countries, they call it graffitis. So they break away from the conventional. If before you are only limited to painting on the canvas, now you can paint on the wall. If before you can only make use of color, in contemporary period, there are some artists who are using their own blood. Take note, they are using their own blood to paint or to create an art. Hence, in contemporary period, there are no strict rules with regard to how to produce art and what art is all about. Because at the end of the day, in contemporary period, arts is the expression of the human person. Arts is no longer produced simply to entertain. Rather, arts is there so that the human person could express his emotions, his feelings, his ideas, aspirations, and even frustrations to a much bigger audience. And so, in contemporary period, arts became embedded. That's embedded. Arts became embedded in various disciplines. Arts is no longer confined to the creation of artworks, but rather, even empirical science during this particular period make use of arts so that their strategies, should I say, so that their implementation of their particular disciplines could become more visible, more easy, and accessible to the public. Let's continue. Now let's look at how arts is envisioned today. According to this definition, arts or art is where we make meaning beyond language. It's important because in producing art or in creating art, its interpretation, its meaning is not limited to how the artist would want to originally convey it. What makes art different from creating a book is that once you create a book, whatever is in there would remain there. I mean, the content of the book would be something which is constant. In contrast, when we talk about art, when you produce an art, for example, you create a painting, you created a sculpture, you created should we say, a play, the meaning, the interpretation of what does that particular art originally mean is beyond your control as an artist because it is up for the public to interpret it. That is why we say that its meaning is beyond language. In addition, art consists in the making of meaning through an intelligent agency eliciting an aesthetic response. Whenever we look at art, regardless of how does it look like, we are attracted to it simply because it is beautiful. Take note of that. All artworks, all pieces of arts, or all pieces of art is beautiful. It's just so happened that each art would have its own beauty, would have its own appeal to the human person. Nonetheless, it's important to understand that all artworks is something beautiful because it always produces a aesthetic response. Humans have instinct for imitation and harmony. By nature, the human person always wanted to see something beautiful, something orderly. And so because of that, human person is normally attracted towards art. Through imitation, humans learn and experience pleasure. Take note of this. Through imitation, humans learn and experience pleasure. People, people, or even you may wonder, why is art so important, or why are we attracted to art? As I mentioned earlier, this is because we find art beautiful. And that perception of ours that art is beautiful produce pleasure in us. We delight on seeing beautiful things. Hence, we delight seeing pieces or different artworks. Art then may be defined as a human pursuit to imitate life, the world into something pleasing or beautiful. Meaning to say, art then is an attempt of the human person to capture something beautiful and to retain it so that he or she can always look at it. Art is also a component of culture reflecting economic and social substrates in its design. When we talk about art, it's not just about beauty. It's not just about order, as I mentioned before, or even harmony. When we talk about art, it's also about reflecting the economic and social substrates of society. Oftentimes, art is used by people in order to show what is happening in the peripheries, what is happening in the poorest places of the society. If we're going to look at the different contexts, Philippine arts has a very unique culture due to the influences of colonization and the surrounding countries. In contrast to perhaps Greek arts or Western arts, it's very difficult for us to look at what is what is an authentic Philippine art. Why? Because we have been colonized by different colonizers. For example, we have been colonized by the Spaniards. When Spaniards came, they don't only they didn't only bring religion to us. They also brought to us their love for art in the form of the santos, the rebultos, the religious image, which up until now has big influence to the people of Paeta, Laguna, and Pampanga. For example, another example, when Americans colonized the Philippines, they didn't only go here to colonize us. They also shared to us their culture, their practices, and even their taste of art. Same goes with the Japanese. Hence, Philippine art, we could argue, is a summation. It's a summary, a combination of Philippine, American, Japanese, and Spanish art. Because these colonizers have great influence not only to our culture, but also in terms of how we produce and appreciate art. Now, at this point, let's look at art across discipline. More particularly, how does art is used by different disciplines. The first one, the first discipline that we could see that have a great, should we say, valuation of what art is, would be the religion. Now, religion is divided into two. We have the Western religion. When we talk about religion here, we're talking about Christianity. We're talking about Christian Catholicism, the Roman Catholic. Okay, so Christian Catholicism, just to clarify. So Christian Catholics are divided into two. The Western part and the Eastern part. Some people would call it the Latin Rite and the Eastern Rite. So for the Western part, they make use of arts in order to create sacred sculptures. As I mentioned earlier, for example, the image of the different santos, the image of Jesus Christ, the image of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the different image of saints and angels. So they make use of arts in wooden sculpture, even sometimes ivory sculpture. On the other hand, when we talk about Eastern religion, they are not more of the three-dimensional um, artworks, because sculptures is a kind of three-dimensional, even sometimes four-dimensional. For for Eastern Rite, they believe in iconography. What is iconography? Paintings. So for them, they make use of arts in producing painting so that they can have a glimpse of the divine. So for the Eastern part of the Catholicism, they are after painting of religious icons, religious figures. If we're going to look at our local religion, those who practices animism, they make use of arts in their rituals, such as dancing and singing. The next discipline would be engineering. So engineering make use of art in producing design and aesthetics. As I've mentioned, architecture should be something beautiful. I mean, who would not want a beautiful house? Everyone wanted to have a beautiful house. That is why for engineering, for the field of engineering, particularly architecture, arts is important, or art is important. The next one, as I've mentioned earlier, art is also make use to make contemporary house energy saving. So they started to install huge panel of glasses in every corners of their house instead of the wall to save electricity. The next discipline would be philosophy. So in the field of philosophy, there is such thing as called art appreciation, where people or where philosophers or students of philosophy were encouraged to appreciate art for its beauty, to go beyond what naked eye is seeing. The fourth one would be psychology. Now, in the field of psychology, apart from having journals, they have what we call diaries or sketchbook. Now, these diaries and sketchbooks are used by psychologists or perhaps some guidance counselor to help students or people suffering from stress, anxiety, and even depression. Through the use of this sketchbook, you can draw whatever you want, and by drawing whatever you want on that piece of sketchbook, you can express your emotion, and that sketchbook serve as sort of the outlet. The sketchbook became the outlet for those negative emotion and help pacify the situation. So by using sketchbook, some people can be aided in terms of controlling their feelings, more particularly when they're depressed, they're anxious, they're stressed, etc. The fifth one would be in the field of medicine. In the field of medicine, they have now what they call the photo voice. So the photo voice is used, it's a one strategy used to reach to HIV and AIDS patient. I don't know if the younger students, the grade 7, 8, and 9 can know it, but hopefully some of the grades 10, 11, and 12 already know what it is. Now, there is a particular condition called HIV, or human immunodeficiency virus, and AIDS. So this particular HIV, HIV and AIDS. I just forgot the exact definition. Sorry, you may just want to Google it. So since these people are oftentimes scared and ashamed of their situation, this particular strategy called photo voice was used by doctors and scientists to reach out to them. So through the use of arts, by capturing photos, they can share whatever they are feeling. For example, they're feeling depressed, they would look for an object that could best represent what they are feeling. And that helps them to convey whatever they are suffering with or whatever they are experiencing. It helped them to convey it to their doctors. The next one would be in the field of research. So in the field of research, I know the senior high school students already know this, that there are two types of research, the quantitative and the qualitative research. But there is such thing as what we call the community-based participatory research. In the community-based participatory research, the researchers and there's no longer a division between the researchers and the research subjects, because the research subjects became sort of also researchers. So the researchers work closely with them. So in one of the projects, in one of the projects overseas, there is what they call the Health in the Backyard project. So in the Health in the Backyard, the research subjects make use of arts in order to produce a research output. Meaning to say, through the use of their phones, through the use of whatever cameras available, they started to create documentaries to show to people what they are experiencing. The next one would be archaeology. So we know that through the use of artworks, we can start to carbon date. When we say carbon dating, we are trying to trace from what particular era this particular artwork, this particular artifact came from. And from there, we can start to know the past. We can start to understand what happened in the past, and hopefully it can shed light to what is happening to us now at present. The last one would be in the field of politics. So in the field of politics, art can be used in two ways, in the positive way and in the negative way. Now, in the positive way, art can be used in the form of propaganda. When we say propaganda, it's about spreading an ideology that you want to impose to other people. For example, during the time of the martial law or martial law regime, people are, should I say, not free to make whatever artwork they want, more particularly if it is against the government. If you go to North Korea, I haven't been there, but based on what I've saw in different documentaries, all artworks in North Korea are always in praise, are always in support of the advocacies of the current regime, of the dictator. So artworks can also be used in the field of politics to blind people from seeing reality, from seeing the struggles of the ordinary citizens. On the other hand, it can be used positively in the form of the freedom of speech. Meaning to say, through the use of art, we can also enlighten other people regarding what is happening. That is why you can see that some artworks is about poor people. So they are painting poor people, they are drawing poor people, not because they want to put them into bad light, not because they want to shame them, not because the artists wanted to exploit them. They are painting these people because they want other people to see that there are some people suffering this kind of situation and we need to do something about it. So in conclusion, we can say that art is at par in terms of dignity with other disciplines. We cannot say that art is inferior. We cannot say that art is something basic and elementary. No, because at the contemporary period, art has proven itself to be so useful that different discipline is making use of it. Hence, it can be argued that the definition of art had already evolved. It already changed based on how other disciplines make use of it. Art, then, is a handmaid of various disciplines. Through the use of art, other disciplines can help push for their goals. So that is our short presentation. I hope that you learned something today. But before we end, this is a short point for reflection. So in 3 to 5 sentences, I want you to answer this question and just submit your answer to your respective advisors. May I repeat? Kindly answer these questions and submit it to your advisors as your output for the entire day. So for grades 7 and 8, the question would be, based on the discussion, what is art for you? Based on everything that I've said, based on everything that we've discussed, if we're going to summarize it, based on your own understanding, what is art for you? For grades 9 and 10, how can art help you as a junior high school student? That's JHS. As a junior high school student. Sorry, just correct it, okay? May I repeat? How can art help you as a junior high school student? So after learning that this is how contemporary period make use of art, it's important to know that in your particular situation today, how can art help you? Now for grades 11 and 12, since we're senior high school, we make the question a little bit difficult. The question is, how can art make a difference in our world today? Based on our discussion, how do you think art can make a difference in our world today? So this would be the guide questions for you, and kindly submit your answers to your advisor. Kindly ask them when is the due for this. So thank you very much. I hope that you learned something new today. Goodbye.
We thank you for conducting such an insightful discussion, Sir Joshua, and I am confident that the topics you've discussed will be beneficial to all of our students. Dear Corinthians, we hope that the topic we covered today will make you appreciate art more, help you understand how it has changed over time, and show you how it may be used in a variety of academic fields. And before we end this webinar, let us sing the Corinthian School hymn to give honor to the alma mater with hope, faith, and love.
There were 3 lessons I would write, 3 words with a burning pen, in tracing of eternal life upon the hearts of men. Have hope though clouds are around, and gladness hides our face in scorn. Wipe away the shadow from thy brow. After every night comes glorious morn. Have faith where thy path is driven. The calm disturb the tempest roar. Notice God rules the host of heaven, and the people of earth forevermore. Of love, not love alone for one, that man is man your brother call, and scatter like the circling sun your charity for all. The spread these lessons on your soul.